If you're looking for good news out of Stillwater, America, it is that the younger players have already started to speak up in regards to the mantra entering 2025. Operation Restoring Order is already underway, at least in the locker room.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 back in bonus bets. If the $5 bet is a winner, make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Meanwhile, we get started in some of the uplifting conversations that you're seeing on, primarily via social media. But some of the younger guys have already started to speak up, like Jonathan Agumadu, who put the hashtag out, Restore Order. The operation to restoring order in Stillwater, America is already underway. And why I do think that this is definitely telling, it does mean that the younger guys do firmly believe that you can restore everything in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and put Oklahoma State back to where it should be. Oklahoma State's rightful place is at the top of the Big 12. More often than not, we should be competing for Big 12 titles. We should be top 3, top 4 every single year, no matter what. But historically, that doesn't equal what we have going on at the moment. So it would make sense for some guys to have some dejected feelings in regards to the season, especially if you're an underclassman that watch some of the upperclassmen underperform or be lazy or show up late or not put in the effort or something to that effect, and then continuously get rewarded with more and more playing time. That has to be frustrating. But that also, in my opinion, is why this whole conversation builds more and more excitement. If the idea of returning 36 upperclassmen was supposed to be this galvanizing piece that carried its weight throughout the course of the season, all the way to Big 12 title and beyond, it unfortunately didn't work. So now it feels natural to shift more towards the youth. If you're going to be in rebuild mode, then bringing back a bunch of seniors isn't going to be massively beneficial anyways, because we just went through that and we witnessed what that equaled. So sometimes you need some of these younger guys like Jonathan Agumadu to speak up and talk about some of the benefits to rocking and rolling into a new year. Rebuilding doesn't always have to be, associated with something negative. But just like some guys are going to leave because some coaches have decisions to make, and some guys are going to be naturally attached more to the coaches individually than the university. Nowadays, it's not so much about recruiting for a university. It's more about relationships. So there will be some defections, no matter what, if some of the coaches are let go. But the regalvanization in the locker room by the younger guys, to me, tells a bigger story. So although we might have some upperclassmen decide to take their talents elsewhere, to me, it might be because they're giving way to some of the younger guys. So where I would start to be concerned is if you start seeing guys like Landon Cleveland and David Kabongo and Rodney Fields and LaDainian Fields, if those guys start to enter the transfer portal, I feel like we're in a bad spot. But if you have some of those guys like the Jonathan Agumadus, the Tamarick Johnsons, Gunnar Wilsons, Yamil Talibs, Luke Webbs, Armstrong Nodems, those individuals should be the foundation for the rebuild. If you're going to rebuild, you want to rebuild predicated upon talent and guys who really want to be there. So to me, it will be a big storyline to watch on who enters the transfer portal, because that'll be an indication on some of the coaches that are likely going to be taking their talents elsewhere. For example, if we know that Charlie Dickey is about to announce his retirement or he's going to move on elsewhere, and some of the players know that as well, then, of course, having some defections on the offensive line, some of the guys that got in really good with Charlie Dickey, they seem to be pretty normal, right? But on the flip side of that, if you have a lot of defensive guys that are excited about the defense, to me, that is another proof set that there is going to be some returning guys on the defensive side of the ball, which is why we're able to push right now defensively, going after so many JUCO guys and even some transfer portal guys. To me, the hesitancy offensively might possibly be because we're going to have some coaches that are finding new homes. That will alleviate a lot of the concerns on who's going to follow who and who stayed here because of X, Y, or Z. And then you are going to have some guys that get kind of lost in the shuffle, like maybe a Timurte. Should Timurte stay? Yes. Is Timurte going to get the opportunity to stay? Likely. But if we are going to replace offensive coordinator, the new OC will have a pretty good hand on deciding who's going to coach the quarterback. So I imagine that some of these guys are going to be, tailing off because they're upperclassmen, because they have an attachment to some of the coaches. But again, if you have a large portion of the youth that is speaking out about how they want to be part of the restoration process, that is the beauty of a rebuild, is you get to basically start fresh. And after our worst season since 1994, 2000, whichever way you want to slice it, cats that got out on the field were typically either played equally to or better than some of the starters. Like, there's nobody that can say that Maluake Smith did not come in and outperform Alan Bowman. There's nobody that can say that Landon Cleveland didn't come in and perform admirably in his role after the Cam Epps ACL situation. Nobody can say that David Kabongo didn't give us everything he had plus some to be one of the bright sides coming back defensively, not to mention Josh Ford. Josh Ford was the highlight when it comes to freshmen on the offensive side of the ball. And some of these younger offensive linemen, perhaps they came because of Dickey, but perhaps they came because they fell in love with Stillwater. They fell in love with the culture. They fell in love with the facilities, the capabilities, Rob Glass, whatever the case may be. There could be a multitude of things that keep them more involved as opposed to potentially looking at transfer options. And to me, this idea behind the younger guys being the ones who are going to kind of, set this mold could be infectious. And it could be huge for guys like a Lyric Rawls or a Parker Robertson, who could come back, but also could very realistically, look to get a new start, to get a new chapter, a new future elsewhere. And I don't think anyone would have any ill will towards those individuals if they were to pursue that. But whenever you're looking at these guys that are dead set for the most part of running everything back to set everything right where it's supposed to be, is something to get excited for. There may be a lot of downtrodden conversations about Cowboy football, especially that you're seeing some universities that are already making moves like Utah and potentially UCF. So to see Oklahoma State kind of sit idly by while not making any announcements, it is frustrating, but there's a big team meeting tomorrow. So I would imagine if there's going to be anything discussed, it's going to be, given to the players at the meeting tomorrow before anything is made publicly, made available. But nonetheless, watching the transfers will be an interesting thing, because I firmly believe that the younger guys believe that they can be part of the restoration process. They can be the crew that is responsible for getting Oklahoma State back where it's supposed to be. And I think even in that, outside of freshmen, you could be talking about some redshirt freshmen and sophomores as well. A large portion of the junior and senior class was kind of tied up into this year. And likely some of those guys already have an idea of what they want to do for their future and if Oklahoma State's going to be a good fit or not. But as it pertains to the coaching decisions that are being made, I think that some of the transfer portal announcements will be kind of hand in hand with the coaches that may be taking their talents elsewhere outside of Stillwater America. But if we're looking for things to be excited about, guys like Jonathan Agumadu putting out this hashtag restore order, and having some of the guys like Landon Fields and Rodney Fields come back and support that, and see guys like Armstrong Nodum who are putting out that God is here to make everything work properly, that gives me a large sense of excitement for the future of Oklahoma State football. I've been saying for most of the year that the younger class was better than some of the starters in certain key positions. And now it's time for them to prove that and be a part of the new landscape that's changing in Stillwater America. Because there hasn't been a lot to get excited about, but I personally believe that is worth getting excited about. If you have a group, a crew that's willing to kind of be the shining light and be the examples for how things are going to be from here on out, I think that is going to bode well for the success immediately entering 2025. But when we're talking about immediate success, maybe getting your dollars right would be helpful for you. Get your dollars right with some NFL Cowboys by going to FanDuel. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a number one sports book in America for a reason, and you need to make sure that you're being part of what makes it number one in America. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if it's a winner. The FanDuel Sports app is going to give you everything you need to place live bets on NFL action. So get squared away today. When you have that hunch in the middle of the game, go ahead and check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more from the same page where you're already placing your bets from. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com today. You can get started with $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet is a winner. Go hammer the over on Tylan Wallace getting more and more involved. Maybe Justice Hill gets in on the action. Jaylen Warren, he's going to be the dude at some point in time. So get in on the picks right now by going to FanDuel.com. Never waste that hunch in the middle of the game. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so I'm not going to go on a long diatribe on my personal feelings behind Mike Gundy. What I think is fair for all of us to acknowledge is that perhaps Mike Gundy had a different vision of where he was going to be at this point in time or how this season was going to go. I don't think anyone would argue that Mike Gundy definitely wants to be in that CEO style of role. I think the problem for Mike Gundy in that CEO style of role is he does have a tendency to be somewhat micromanaging. So if you're going to do the CEO style role, the pivotal part there is that you trust the guys that you have in control of certain spots. Like you have to be able to trust that if Brian Nardo is your defensive coordinator, that you're going to let him do his own thing. You're not going to interfere. You're not going to mess with him. And at the end of the season, if he hasn't lived up to expectations or midseason, if he hasn't done anything that makes you happy, then you have those conversations. You make those moves. You get rid of people. I know Mike Gundy doesn't love doing that, but this is a new age of college football. We're living on what you've done successfully over the last 20 years. It means less and less and less. Now, I'm not saying that guys are only interested in money. I don't think that's the case either. But whenever you're talking about Mike Gundy being in this CEO role, if he were to have a hands-off approach, that would mean that he allows Casey Dunn to do whatever. And maybe that was part of the issue, was he thought he had the CEO role thing figured out because he had a lot of continuity in the staff, right? You've got a lot of coaches that have been here 9 years, 10 years, 14 years, 17 years. Therefore, it probably felt like a machine that could almost operate itself. It didn't happen, but that's okay. If Mike Gundy has a ridiculous buyout, if it's 21, 23, 25, whatever, 26 million, at the end of the day, it probably makes more sense to divvy that money up for a new offense coordinator, O-line coach, tight end coach, things of that nature, than get rid of Mike Gundy. But what I think should be in play here is for Mike Gundy to take that CEO style of a role, but legitimately just let it run its course. So if you bring in a new offensive coordinator, whomever that OC is, of course he has to answer to Mike Gundy, but he should be able to run his own show. So if he wants to start Justin Kirkland at quarterback, then he should be able to do that. And now, obviously, that's a wild scenario that would never happen, but my point remains. Having Mike Gundy in charge of too much, it doesn't work when he also wants his hands in the cookie jar all the time too, right? Either do the CEO role and manage everything kind of from afar and make sure the perception is good and NIL is going good and recruiting is going good, and let your offense coordinator be a coordinator. Let your defense coordinator be a coordinator. Don't be coming on the headset and canceling stuff. Don't be bringing guys in the middle of the season to inject a different kinds of roles in a 4-2-5 as opposed to a 3-3-5. Sometimes, in theory, those are great ideas. If you can bring somebody in mid-season that can provide a Band-Aid, that's great. But if it doesn't work, then you have to be able to acknowledge that my idea did not work. I thought I could be the CEO that kind of overstood everybody, but I also thought that I'd dip my hand into here and dip my hand into there and dip my hand into there. Mike Gundy dipping his hand into too many things, in my opinion, is why we're in the predicament that we are right now. He's either got to pick. Either be the coach that's hands-on every position, every group, every meeting, all the time, or do the CEO thing. But if you're going to do the CEO thing, you have to give people enough rope to do whatever they want, essentially, right? You've heard the terminology before. Give them enough rope that they hang themselves, right? And that could happen. I think if you didn't interfere with anything Brian Nardo had going, I think a lot of people would say that Brian Nardo was one of those individuals that likely hung himself, figuratively speaking, of course. But then maybe Mike Gundy had too many hands in a cookie jar. Maybe Joe Bob had too much pull. So Brian Nardo is the defense coordinator, but somewhat in title only because his role isn't designated at certain positions, certain times, so on and so forth. And the same has got to be said about offensive coordinator. Now, I do think wholeheartedly that Mike Gundy did try to do the CEO approach, and he tried to give a lot of the responsibilities a couple of years ago to Dunn and somebody like a Rob Glass, and it just didn't work, right? And so 2023, Mike Gundy had to dive back in and kind of reconfigure some things, and it obviously didn't translate well to this season. So let me know down in the comment section what you think about the Mike Gundy situation. Again, I don't think he's going to be going anywhere. No matter how much pressure Chad Weiberg is getting from Dr. Schrum, I don't think that pressure equals him getting rid of Mike Gundy. I do think that pressure means that we're going to see a decent amount of coaching changes, including the offensive coordinator position, offensive line coach, tight end coach. I think there's going to be a big shakeup offensively. And then, of course, defensively, we're going to have some dudes that are asked to take their talents elsewhere. So the transfer portal, I think, will be somewhat indicative of the coaches that are likely going to be problematic remaining in Stillwater. But, yeah, I think this makes sense. If you're Chad Weiberg, maybe the meeting is like, we can't get rid of you. Right? We owe you too much money. But we would like you to allow somebody to come in like a Dana Holgerson and let him do his own thing. And don't be upset if he tells you no on the headset, or if he tells you no, I'm not doing that, or I'm not playing that guy, or I'm not switching to that scheme. You hire him and you get out of the way and let him do his job, or you fire him. This keeping everybody around because they're your buddy and this, that, and the other. It was a great idea. It just didn't work. So now I think that Chad Weiberg is going to be getting enough pressure from enough people, including Dr. Schrum, to take some things away from Mike Gundy, even if it's not necessarily contractually. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If Mike Gundy wants that CEO role, then he should get it, but it does have to come with some limitations. If you're going to be the CEO, you cannot dip your hands into every single cookie jar all that often. Either be the cookie jar coach or be the CEO guy. You can't do both. Doing both has been disastrous for all parties involved. And just like it would be disastrous for all parties involved to get anywhere, to do anything, if you don't have the ticket game figured out. That's why you got to get squared away with the right tickets. Game Time is where you need to be to get your tickets to virtually almost anything. This isn't just sports related. If you want to dive deep into comedy, music, theater, they have you covered at Game Time tickets. And with a Game Time pick, it's going to be much easier for you to find your favorite live events than ever before. The Game Time picks filters out all the fluffy stuff So you only see the incredible deals on great seats without having to search through thousands of hours of tickets. The priority is for you to get squared away today with the all-in pricing. It's the toggling feature that gives you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. The lowest price guarantee means that GameTime will credit you back 110% of the difference with the most flexible customer service policy in the industry. The panoramic view from the seat is the bee's knees, and it puts you exactly where you need to be instead of guessing. So you need to take the guesswork out of you buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account. Redeem that code, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Locked On College, all one word. Download the Game Time app today because you already know what it is. It's game time. Well, now we get to dip into the basketball waters. And JC Hoyt obviously is not traveling or not doing as much because she's set to have a baby within the next couple weeks. I do believe that means that she will coach the games inside Gallagher-Iba, and maybe Jasmine Player will take the ones on the road. And although things were looking great, it was great to see Jasmine Player get her first officially unofficial W as the coach of the Cowgirls. She also dropped the final game of their trip out to South Beach. That's all right. You have to learn through adversity. You have to have trials and tribulations. And now they'll get another opportunity Wednesday to kind of set the record straight. It was amazing to see freshman Jaden Wooten get the Big 12 newcomer of the week, averaging a little over 15.3 points a game in the most recent tournament for her. So the JC Hoyt-led Cowgirls, they finally had their first loss of the season. Shout out Richmond. All right, didn't see that one coming. You beat Arkansas, lose to Richmond, but it happens. It's the crazy world of collegiate athletics, especially nowadays with the transfer portal and the NIL market. Hopefully the Cowgirls will get back on track. Should do so fairly comfortably Wednesday, but we shall see. As for the men's basketball, yeah, it's been up and down. And I have not made any, hidden thoughts. For me, it's win at Gallagher Arena. That's it. For year one under Lutz, it has always been protect Gallagher-Iba, restore the roar in GIA, and whatever happens on the road, it is what it is. So I'm okay with, winning a couple games, losing a couple games on the road. So far, he's protected Gallagher-Iba, and that is what I've asked for. Now, as we start to get ready for Big 12 play, you don't know what you're going to get. Now, I will say defensively, that's going to keep us in a decent amount of games no matter what happens. And the beauty of it is we're not a great shooting team, but there will be times where we accidentally, magically shoot very well. The days that we shoot very well, we will be a problem for anybody that we're playing on that specific day. The rest of the season, give us the hustle, give us the determination, the grit, the bloody noses, the diving for loose balls, diving over benches. Give us all of that because it is what I think is important in Gallagher-Iba Arena. Now, next year, obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a different story. Next year would be helped tremendously if the Cowboys were to somehow land number one player in the state of Oklahoma, Gatorade Oklahoma Player of the Year, and Cowboy legendary dad, Jalen Montonati. Of course, Brian Montonati was an Eddie Sutton-led Cowboy who coaches at Owasso in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. And this was one of the biggest reasons that I was hoping that if we didn't maybe get Steve Lutz, it would be somebody like a Danny Sprinkle. I know Danny Sprinkle has a long relationship with Brian Montonati. I don't know exactly, how it kind of all ties together. But nonetheless, I know that Danny Sprinkle is the type of individual that would likely give Brian Montonati a job in order to help land Jalen. Hey, we've been there before, all right? We had to bring in Cade Cunningham's brother to get the Cade Cunningham sweepstakes to take place in Stillwater. And if we wouldn't have got stripped away from the NCAA tournament play, then, maybe that whole thing turns out completely differently. But then again, if it does turn out different, maybe Mike Boynton still has the job. Nonetheless, Jalen and Brian Montonati will be on hand as the Cowboys take on Tulsa this Wednesday in Tulsa. It'll be a good opportunity for Steve Lutz to kind of give the introduction to what his brand of basketball is going to look like in Stillwater. Do I think we have much of a shot at Jalen Montonati? Realistically, I don't think so. I mean, we're always going to have a shot, yeah. But if we're going to have a connection that brings Brian into the fold, it's going to be by playing this Eddie Sutton style of basketball. So if Brian and Jalen are on hand to see the old school brand of basketball that Brian grew up on, that Brian knew made Stillwater America and Gallagher Iba great, then we do actually, I think, have a little bit more of an opportunity. Jalen Montonati can basically go anywhere he wants. He can go to any blue blood and make a lot of decisions on his future. But if he were to be part of the restoration of Gallagher Iba, restoring the roar in GIA, now we all know that would tug at Brian's heartstrings a little bit. And Brian stayed in Oklahoma, decided to coach in the Tulsa area. If having that connection didn't mean something, then I would imagine they would have both already moved on. Because again, there's a lot of blue bloods in the country that would hire Brian Montonati just to get Jalen. And Brian Montonati is a great basketball mind. I think we all know that. But I have never been shy on my affinity for legacies. And when you're trying to kind of rebuild what Gallagher Iba used to be in the sport of basketball, especially under the late, great Eddie Sutton, having a connection like Jalen Montonati with Brian Montonati and getting them to stay home would be absolutely massive for not only Cowboy basketball, the restoration of the roar in GIA, but that would probably supplant, the idea that Steve Lutz could coach here longer than his contract. Whatever the contract is, I think this season is going to be kind of hit and miss when it comes to recruiting. I don't know how Steve Lutz, recruits. But if he were to land somebody like a Jalen Montonati, that's the kind of guy that brings other guys with him. We've experienced that before. I mean, when you had LeBron Nash and Markel Brown and Marcus Smart and Mike Cobbins, that was a crew that kind of all helped assemble something pretty spectacular in Stillwater. Now, it didn't equal what we thought it could, but you got to start that rebuild somewhere. And a Jalen Montonati would be massive, doesn't even begin to explain what that would be like for Cowboy basketball. And if we could get Brian, that would be even better. It's a way to connect the past, the future, the whole 9 yards. And I would imagine that there's got to be at least some small part of Brian Montonati that wouldn't like to see this get shifted the right way again in Stillwater. I think we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of ground to make up, but we've got some things going in our favor. So hopefully we play like that Wednesday and we have a good showing, and it at least convinces them to step back and think a little bit longer about whether they should choose Stillwater America again or not. All right, y'all. So we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere, so happy you choose to be here. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike it if you don't. That's okay, too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast people out there. You're the bricks, the bread, the butter, the fountain, the fondue, the funny stuff, funky stuff. You're all of it. So help a brother out. Leave a star. Leave a review. Do what you do. All righty, y'all. Later, my taters.